So today we're looking at more Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition, and we're going to continue on with the little journey that we're going on with regard to magic items. So what we're going to look at today, we're going to look at some magic items from, well, not so much going through the individual items because there's a lot, but what we will do is look through some of the ways that when you're placing them, maybe talk about how you have to be careful with the items. If you know what you're placing, you need to know what that item is and how it may or may not impact on your adventure. If you're running it purely random, you just need to be aware that stuff's going to happen. However, there's always someone that I'm pretty sure that there's a handful of podcasts and people that are already gone through nearly all of these types of adventures, these types of things for the magic items. What I would like to focus on is a little bit more on once you find the item. So let's begin. First things first, and that is understanding what a magical item is. Now, we might end up talking a little bit about the fabrication when the players want to do something, but for the most part, wands, rods, staves, amulets, books, all of these things. Some of them show up as magical by a spell when you do detect magic. If you have something that can detect magic, or the players can feel it or sense it sometimes, the things glow on occasion, and that's another point. There's a lot that you have to think about as the DM as to whether or not you want to go down that pathway and how specific you wish to be, and there's no by the book answer, except that there's just lots of things that you have to know. And honestly, some of it is a little contradictory, but you just need to work with what you've got. So some items are specifically used by a class, meaning that no one else can use it. Some are on occasion by an alignment, and if you're the wrong alignment and you put on the ring, you open up the book, you hold the amulet, then you end up with some negative effect. Cursed items are cursed items and look and feel exactly like a standard normal item. In fact, if anything, a cursed item will probably feel like it wants to be held more than a magical item would. You can imagine that a magical sword that's not cursed would almost look inert, versus a cursed sword which feels warm, like welcoming. But that's something that, again, the DM has to work out. When the players get an item, so if they find a ring and they're pretty sure it's magical, they've cast a detect magic, and that detect magic has said that it's an alteration enchantment, then they can go, okay, yep. Yeah. The way how I handle detect magic, I treat it like wine tasting. The more experienced you are, then the more you feel out of the actual magic. So you get abjuration for protection spells, and like the ring of protection might just, a first level may feel the enchantment and alteration, but then a couple of levels later, if they do it again, they might feel the abjuration of the protections, and that sort of thing. And then if there's an element to it, they might feel an elemental, some sort of conjuring summoning capability, that sort of thing. And that's how I differentiate a first level versus a 10th level or an 18th level casting the same spell. But again, that's entirely up to how the DM wants to deal with it. And we throw these spell effects into the box of things that the DM has to have figured out. So they find an item, they determine that it's magic, and then they have to figure out how it's used. Often with wands, staves, and rods, the components to casting it are usually inscribed somewhere within the actual item or on the item, and that's something that they may have to find some comprehend languages or do something extra to figure out what the command words are. And this is where the sages come into it as well. You can always go to a sage, but that's something that they've just got to work on. So there are several ways that they can find out what these items are, and sometimes you can just pick them up and you may have already an idea with what an item might be, but there are quite a few where you just have no idea and you don't know what the net effect is going to be once you've added them to your repertoire of tricks. So the first and foremost way that players may think that they can find out an item is by the identify spell. A divination spell, identify. As we know, we've got a lot to go through, and there's a big slab of text. Wow. Imagine reading that. Well, the crux of it, there's actually only a handful of things to know, and then most of it is the caveats. There's a lot of caveats to it. So one item is touched or handled at a time. You have to wear it or hold it exactly as it's meant to be, worn, held, or used. And meaning that if it's cursed, it's going to activate. If you put on a ring of invisibility, I'd say you're going to be invisible. You might not even have to cast the spell. Usually the first thing that most people do is think about that. Put things on, see what happens, if there's any immediate effect. But what we're assuming is we're moved on from that. So dagger has to be held, and so on. So for each segment, it's 15 plus 5% per level of the magic user. And then that's for one of the properties to be known. So some items, generally this is going to be for when there's an item of some specific importance and the players can't identify what exactly it completely is. Then it might have 3 or 4 different functions. But anyway, so for the most part, for every property of the item, and if it's a ring of protection, it'll just say it's a ring of protection of some protection. It's a positive benefit and so on. You'll get an idea. You won't get an exact plus, you won't get an exact anything until you're in combat using it or being attacked for the first time and so on. So 15 plus 5% per level. So obviously at first level it's 20%. Then there's also, that's actually held in secret. Then you got to make a saving throw, and then you can know it. So basically, if you hit the exact number of your saving throw, you get more of the detail than not. If you just make your saving throw, then you're going to get an idea of what it is, and if you just fail it by a single pip, you'll be misled, or you won't get a full idea that of what the effect might be. So maybe what'll happen is that you'll pick up the ring of protection, you'll cast the spell, identify, you put it on, you recognize that it's defensive, you make your saving throw, and then you go, but it's actually going to hurt your armor class rather than improve it. So it's not quite a cursed item, but just a net negative result. So the players can either live with that, think, well, did I make the pass? Did I make or fail it? And move on, or do they just discard the item straight away? Because obviously, who wants to have a negative on your, like, a worse armor class, which sort of works around a bit, because even if you supply all of these magical items to the players, they've still got to know what they are and work out how to use them and when to use them and so on. So with that, you've got one segment for the one property, for the one item, and for this particular spell, you get one segment per level as your duration. So at 5th level, then you're going to have to take off that ring, put on the next ring, take off that ring, put on the hat, take all that off, put on a pair of boots, which may mean that you don't get an exact 5 for 5, you might only get 3 or 4. Once you've got an idea of the item, and if it's a charges, you get a rough count, not an idea, an exact match, but a rough count. Then all of a sudden the magic user feels seriously exhausted and loses 8 points of constitution, and then has to regain that. You have to rest for 8 hours in order to be able to gain 1 point per hour, 6 turns, 1 hour. Now the caveats, obviously you've got to put the items on, which is the thing. So put on the girdle, put on the hat, put in the rings and whatever else. Some of it will be easy, some of it not so easy. And as I said, at this point we're assuming before that we've gone to here, the party have done their usual bit. Oh, it's a ring, I put it on. I don't feel any different, I don't turn invisible, I don't fly, I don't jump up in the air or whatever. So now they've just put it in their pocket, ready to identify it. You've got the material components, which is the awesome part, which is a pearl of at least 100 GP in value, and an owl feather that's steeped in wine with the infusion drunk. Then you have to swallow a whole carp, which is like a goldfish. So, does it say live? A live miniature carp, there you go, a live goldfish. Now I think some of this is just magic users trolling and punking other magic users. yeah, let's just tell him that he has to swallow the fish. Yeah. But who knows? I go with some of these, I don't go with all of it. The other thing is that you've got to actually cast this spell within 1 hour per spell level, like per level of the magic user of finding it, which kind of also sucks, but you know. So I move around, I colour in the edges, okay, when it comes to this. So the infusion, yes, you drink it, and then the pearl, you sort of, you know, work out how every spell effects, you work out how you want to do it. The way how I imagine it is you're almost like putting the pearl to your forehead or something, because it doesn't say you drink the pearl, it just says you drink the other infusion of the wine and with the feather in it, then the pearl, and we're done. So anyway, so they're the biggest caveats, is that you have to sort of work out in terms of whether or not you're going to run this exactly or some form of modification. I would always recommend that you have some form of modification on this. And some people just run it straight up. Yeah, identify, pop, done. It's this. Because you're not going to walk around with this spell in your repertoire of ready to cast spells. You need to have a bit of time and prep to put it all together. So there's that. Another way for characters, the party, to figure out an item, speak with the dead, especially if they just killed the person who was using it, or if the person who was using it just died. But depending on the level of the cleric, you've obviously got a number of questions you can ask, and you have the number of depth of knowledge. You also get whatever that person, you still get that person's alignment involved, or if they don't want to help and so on. It's not forcing them to actually be useful or beneficial, but still, that's always an option. Another option is at 9th level. You can commune, and basically you're asking the deity yes or no questions, or someone within the deity's sort of like office, yes or no questions about the type of item it is. And again, you're not going to be tapping this unless it's an item of very specific means, like if you know that it's almost a relic, or if it's something that's really important to the campaign or to the mission that's being set. Now, on top of what the magic user can do, the cleric can still cast chant and prayer in order to get a boost to the magic user. I'd have no problem with that as a DM. So, especially because it's like a 5th level, when you're playing with prayer, I mean, you're a cleric, you're praying, and at this level, your agents of the deity are actually responding, so it's doing things. Now it says here, duplicates the effects of chant, regard to bonuses of +1 for friendly attacks and saving throws and blah blah blah. So that still works in my mind for what the character wants to do. So if the magic user is going to cast Identify and needs to have those adjustments made, prayer, done. We can cast prayer and they get a bit of a boost. Same thing with chant. And again with chanting, if you've got 2 clerics, it's +2 because they all stack. So I have no problems with using chant and prayer in those ways. And especially I think that a lot of clerics don't get to use their full abilities just because people get too ingrained exactly how it's written. Sometimes the special effects and sometimes other options need to be explored. Just like in Identify, I would have no problems if they went to the library, and if they wanted to research first, would that give them a percentage chance extra for their initial, or a plus on their saving throw? It would be one or the other. I wouldn't double, but I'd figure it out from there and I'd work it out. So, like I said, especially if we're talking about something that's got a little bit of history and a little bit of usefulness to it, that way they've got more of a chance. Alright, so from the player's point of view, if you're a bard, there's a chance that you might know something about this item, or an item like this, or an item that has been designed something similar, that's shown up, that was worn by Heimdall or whatever. You know, you'll know something. And that's where all of this comes in. So if you're a bard in the middling levels, by the time you're a bard at middling levels, and pretty much everyone else is still in their 6th and 7th, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of just picking an item up and going, this looks exactly like, and working it out from there, which is pretty cool. So if we look at what that means, a legend, lore, item, knowledge, percentage base, has of knowing something about person, place, thing, knowing what a particular magic item is, and so on. So there are limitations, but for the most part, you want the players to try and find ways of exploring how the magic on the items are, without it being too easy, but also not being drawn out. Ultimately, it shouldn't take them a couple of days to figure out some basic functions. But when it comes to broadstaves and wands and some of the more special items, they need to do a bit of homework. Part of the Gygaxian way that these items exist is that they're actually been created time ago, and how and why is no longer in modern memory or living memory, even for the elves. Which is why when you find the magic item, it's quite an experience and should be something that's quite, funky in the way that it's done. Because even when a player decides to fabricate something, it's not easy. If they say, I want to make a bag of holding, guaranteed someone's going to have to go and try and harvest some phase spider webs somewhere. And that's not good. And then you've got everything else that has to happen as well. It's long and involved. And for the 5,000 XP or 25 GP rough sale price, you don't really know what you're going to get at the end of it. But sure. I suppose it's worthwhile just having a talk a little bit about it. I've done one previously on the fabrication of magic items. But basically it's controlled by the DM. The players shouldn't just be told no, that they're happy to be having their time wasted, money wasted, resources wasted in order for something that's going to be a no. So just go, yeah, okay. It gives them a shot. But they need to have an item of an exquisite quality, of the highest level of craftsmanship, of the best materials, put together by the best people, and so on. So they have to find these people, they have to find the materials, they have to find the right things, which all costs money. Then they have to find the special ingredients, they have to do the research on the spells, they have to do the research on what's required to get to that thing. And then, if they're lucky, they get a thing. So if you're going to make something that's already known, you sort of know what you're looking for. If they're making something new, then they have to do a lot of their legwork to work out, well, what is it that they want, and it's a bit of a hike. But it's time consuming as well, like game time consuming. You just go, okay, well, that's going to take you 6 weeks to figure out what's required. And if the party are willing to wait 6 weeks, if they've got the time, and this is where the DM gets to sort of try and maybe take a character out. If someone's disappearing for a little while, that's a good way of moving a character out. They're doing research, they've got other things they're doing, and so on. Anyway, so fabrication of these items should be rare to this level. They might make something that's like a cheap knockoff variant. You can make an invisibility ring. And when you make your invisibility ring, you've got to have the high ring, you've got to have the invisibility spell, you've got to have the permanency, you've got to have the enchantment item, you've got all of the spells. It's very straightforward for something like an invisibility ring. And then, if it works, you have a ring of invisibility, which you probably have anyway. They're sort of around, but still, when you make it, you get some points, which is good. We like that. And it also means that the characters have done something as well. They feel like that they've actually achieved a little bit of something extra, which is nice. So don't discourage it. Don't discourage the fabrication of magic items or the writing of scrolls, creating spells. That helps them get into the game and into the milieu. Just like the right magical item can really be not just useful, but it can build an entire campaign. Especially when you get something really cool, then people want that. They're coming after it. So it's always good. I'm not going to go into depth on special swords, weapons. I suppose it can also apply to armor and whatever. But we all know that when you've start to get some intelligence on the swords and you get some powers and abilities, there's some caveats in there that we need to work with. In part, it's a matter of whether you want to go down that way. And then you've got the whole ego of the sword versus the player and so on. So I don't know. When it starts to get to that point of taking away from the player, I understand if you have a sword of an alignment and it may not like who's holding it, may not like the person, and it will resist, and it'll be reluctant to do things and whatever else. That's fine, but I keep it to a minimum. In my mind, I keep it to a minimum. 75% of all magical items or magical swords are no special abilities, which does lend itself to obviously 1 in 4 having something, and then we're working it out from there. But play with this very carefully. Some of this can be very much game destroying and even party destroying, because players like to actually hand weapons over to each other on occasion, especially when you've got one character that starts up fresh and someone else has a scimitar +1 or a cutlass +1. They can hand it over to someone else in the short term just to give them that +1 weapon. We also have obviously relics, but again, I'm not going into the relics today. That's guaranteed a whole topic onto itself. Okay, so we've come to the end of our little adventure and exploration of magical items and so on. You can obviously use whatever you wish, do whatever you wish, however you wish, and so on. But magic is something that should be probably still revered by the players as much as possible. They should understand that all magic comes with a price. That's always a good one. That there are many magical rings. None of them are to be used lightly. That's always a good one. And what comes around goes around. So you got stuff, people want that. Sometimes they get attracted to it as well, the magic itself. There are things that like to consume magic and have a thirst for magic. I'm talking to you, dragons. And small, and you know, just some of those sorts of bright, shiny things that people love to collect. So there's always that. Alright, so what I'd just like to say is thank you everyone for one more session. Hopefully there's something in here that you found useful, and I appreciate everybody pitching in with their ideas and popping in with their thoughts. So yep, look, if you've got one of your items that you absolutely love, and if you're a DM, if you've made something, that's great. Let us know. And if you're what you would normally do with the discovery of magical items. For me, I've never been a Monty Hall kind of guy, so it's might be reasonable to find up to a +2 magical weapon and armor, but rarely anything more than that. But that's, you know, I mean, I don't run everything based off a particular system as such. It's just how it feels. So anyway, well, thank you very much for bearing with me and sticking around, and I look forward to putting another one of these out, and we'll try and punch another couple out over the next 2 weeks. So please let me know. All right, thanks, like, subscribe, all the good stuff, and just have a look around at some of the other options as well. There might be other people who have some different takes on magical items that you might like the feel and might like the look of. And I'll hopefully catch up with everybody later. Leave some comments. Always happy to read them, and I try to respond back as much as possible. All right, thanks very much, guys. Have a good one, and stay safe.